You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, happy Wednesday evening, folks. It's the middle of the week, and if you're in sequestration, it is Wednesday. It's hard to tell sometimes when all the days are blending together. No idea how much longer this is going to go on, but they are predicting at least until the end of this month. I know astrologically, when we had Jeff Harmon on with Rocky Stucci and I, he was talking about the end of this month too as being the time where everything starts to shift a little bit back to normal, and that May is going to be uprising and June is going to be really on the, what was the language he used, turning over to better times. So let's hope that all sticks true. Apparently it does astrologically, so there we are, and we'll go with that for now. This is Scotty Roberts, by the way. You're listening to my program, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. For those of you who aren't listening there, you can go tune in the audio stream there, and you can also check out all the different places where this show airs. And also, if you're just listening tonight, you can come over and join the video simulcast. And that's over on the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. You can join the live chat room there and really get to know some people over there, share your thoughts, and discuss this show as it's happening right over there. So you're welcome to come on over anytime. Thank you all for joining me, no matter how you're doing it tonight. And so I want to, before I get going, I'm just going to throw up the one thing that I talked about yesterday, because these are available. I have my new Intrepid radio program t-shirts. You can go get them over on my Etsy site. Here, that's the blue one. This is the black one over here. And it also comes in a hoodie. So go avail yourself of these shirts, and there's the hoodie, and that's over at my Etsy page. That's Etsy, ETSY.com/shop/ what is the slash? Oh, Son of a Patriot. So that's my Son of a Patriot site. So there you go. Those are available. If you listen to the show, I think you'll enjoy getting yourself one of these. So and I thank you in advance for that. We've already had several orders for those come in. So get yours now. And we're going to pick up our conversation on the mystery language. And if you've noticed, as we've been talking about this all starts to tie into the things that we've been talking about for months on this show. And that is the whole idea of being awake, being aware, and being in the now. It's being able to focus on where you are now. And all of this mystery language falls into that. I want to recap the 7 things we left off with at the end of the show yesterday, because I rattled through those awfully quickly. This is what we've learned so far about the mystery language. And the mystery language, if you've seen, is a language of symbolism. It's a language of parables. It's a language that's hidden deep within. It's the language that you have to stop, be in the moment, be aware of where you are, what you are, who you are, and be awake. Wake yourself up to these things. Number 1, the mystery language is not a language in the sense that we understand language or linguistics today. Doesn't have to do with, stuff like this, the written word, and things like that. It's something much deeper than that. Number 2, it was used by initiates into the mysteries all over the world from the earliest days of humanity, and it's still used so today. Number 3, it was originally the common property of all mankind. Everybody understood what the mystery language was about. But since the downfall of ancient customs, ancient races, ancient ways of perceiving things, it's since become esoteric. And so it's, remember that, and I'll repeat this from yesterday too, in the mystery religions, the mystery schools of thought, back in ancient times, there was the exoteric, the things that drew you in because you were curious about what they had to say. And there was that superficial, or that surface layer of things that everybody was welcome to hear. But if you wanted to come in and were interested by that and drawn in, you became an initiate into the mystery schools, then you were given the esoteric language and the esoteric teachings. And that's now is only understood by initiates at the time. And that's to say those who were instructed in its use. Number 4, it's essentially symbolical. It's allegorical. It's pictorial. This whole idea of mystery language. Number 5, the symbols, the allegories, the pictures of the mystery language can be interpreted in various ways and by means of various keys, such as numerology, astronomy, astrology, and it's independent of any spoken or written language. These are the things we're learning about what it is, by the way. 6, it unlocks the meaning of the archetypical symbols in myths and in fairy tales, allegories, parables. It unlocks all those things. Remember, we quoted Jesus from the Bible even. When he was teaching his disciples, he said, the world doesn't get this parable. You get it because you understand the deeper mysteries. That's where I'm taking you. This is what he was teaching. Mystery school teaching. And so parables, alchemical books, sacred texts, such as the Bible itself, reveal the hidden meaning that is underneath the literal and obvious narrative. And then, of course, number 7, that's the basis of Sanskrit. Egyptian hieroglyphics, Chinese and Mayan ideographs, and a whole host of other ideographical, too many G's in there, ideographical languages. That's the key. That's what's underneath it all, which later developed into languages and how we know and use them today, and written linguistics. So I mentioned that these are the things that we've covered. We can understand this is what it is, this whole mystery language, but there are keys to understanding the mystery language, which we're going to get into now. It's only the 3rd day that we've started this topic that we're getting into it. And so the first and foremost key to the mystery language is that it can be contained within another ordinary language, such as written English. You can find that in the King James Bible even, with all its gloriously early 17th century language, the 1611 King James. In this way, hidden meanings are concealed, though not perceived, save through the help of special instruction. There's letters, there's syllabic signs, possess at the same time the hidden powers or the meanings of the numbers, which we discussed a little bit earlier this week, and which includes geometrical shapes of all kinds, to which we have to add pictures or ideographs and symbols. And all of this is helped out by the parables and the allegories and another form of narrative or parts of narratives. And all of these elements employed either independently or in combination, whether expressed in writing or stonework or by other means, comprise the keys to the mystery language. You look at things like when I say stonework, think of Stonehenge, the stone circle, Avesbury, the big stone circle. All these other henges and places were all circular. There was a symbolism in the circle itself, as we discussed yesterday. And we're going to hit that a little bit today, the circle and the cross. And so the facility with which this language could be contained in ordinary languages led to the interpretation into many of the dogmas of the early Christian church, such as doctrines of the 7 sacraments, the Trinity, the resurrection, the 7 cardinal sins, and the 7 virtues. These were all distorted allegories that were filched from the Greek and the Egyptian mysteries and introduced into the teachings of the church to bolster its claims to theological supremacy over the hated pagan religions which threatened to undermine its authority. And we covered that in great detail, that emergence of the literalist historical Orthodox Church, and how they won the fight and pretty much suppressed all of this knowledge for a great number of centuries. But as the 7 keys to the mystery language remained in the keeping of the highest among the initiated hierophants of antiquity, it's only the partial use of a few out of the 7 which passed through the treason of some early church fathers and ex-initiates into the Greek mystery schools into the hands of the new sects of the Nazarenes. And as we mentioned in previously this week and in other things that we've talked about, some of the early fathers of the church, such as Origen, were initiates, but the last fragments of their knowledge have long since been lost to the modern Christian church and its many sects. Now, remember when we talked about the Cathars, and we talked about all these different groups that formed. Some of these church fathers were initiates into those rites, but their teachings were suppressed and they were eventually lost. And I've mentioned Madame Blavatsky several times, H.P. Blavatsky. She wrote her book, The Secret Doctrine, and she maintains that India is the only country in the world today, well, at least at her time today, which still possessed adepts in the occultic sciences who possess the knowledge of all the 7 keys and their manifold subsystems. She goes on to say, since the fall of Memphis, Egypt began to lose those keys one by one, and Chaldea had preserved only 3 in the days of Berosus. As for the Hebrews and all their writings, they show no more than a thorough knowledge of the astronomical, geometrical, and numerical systems of symbolizing all the human, and especially the psychological or physiological, functions. They never had the higher keys. So this is where we're going to kind of part company with eminent Russian occultists. Although it's true that the doctrines contained in the Jewish Kabbalah and the commentaries on them display little or no knowledge of the higher keys that Blavatsky hinted at, this is manifestly untrue of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And this predates any system of Jewish theosophy by many millennia. And it's clear to anyone who knows the mystery language and has thoroughly studied the book that its compilers were fully conversant with all the 7 keys. And the same applies to the teachings of Pythagoras, who, as we discussed earlier, spent 22 years studying the occult sciences with his teachers in the Temple of Egypt. Pythagoras, he's considered to be one of the greatest ancient mathematicians and philosophers. And so if the 7 keys were known to his instructors, and we are in no doubt of this, there's every reason to suppose that they were known to the fullest extent by their predecessors. the great hierophants of the mystery schools of the 18th dynasty, who flourished some 1,000 years before Pythagoras even visited Egypt. And 18th dynasty is squarely where this guy over my shoulder, who we've talked about, Senenmut, who I believe was the historical Moses. This was the dynasty in which he would have lived and ruled as a grand vizier, and became the Moses of the biblical stories, which I think greatly watered down the story of who the man really was. And so we have to incline to the view that Blavatsky, like many occultists today, being overly wedded to the notion that India was, and some still think remains, the preeminent repository of the occultic sciences, wrongly stated in her public writings that the ancient Egyptian priests were inferior in learning to their Indian counterparts. Now, whether Blavatsky held different views in private is open to question. For what she says in The Secret Doctrine seems to suggest that she had a higher regard for the wisdom of the Egyptian hierophants than is apparent from a casual reading of her work. And so we have to quote, "The Egyptian priests have forgotten much. They altered nothing. The loss of a good deal of the primitive teaching was due to the sudden deaths of the great hierophants, who passed away before they had time to reveal all of what they knew to their successors, and mostly to the absence of the worthy heirs to the knowledge. Yet they have preserved in their rituals and dogmas the principal teaching of the secret doctrine." And it's through the use of the 7 keys to the mystery language and their subsystems that this secret doctrine can be unlocked, interpreted, finally understood. And whether the doctrine is in the form of a book, a symbol, an allegory, a myth, a tree, a flower, a man himself. And Blavatsky mentions that 3 of these keys in the passage that we quoted above, namely the astronomical, the geometrical, and the numerical keys. We discussed the last of these 2 keys a couple of times in the past when we were talking about the mystery religions, the mystery schools, I guess you could call it. And though we doubt whether more than a handful of people really realize just what they have available to them in the works of these people, and in looking at the things and studying and making themselves aware and awake. If they realized what they had in their hands, they could do something with it. There's the 4th key, the logogrammatical, that symbolism. I'm stumbling over this because my notes are a little sketchy here. When we told you the many words in the Bible, and even the entire sentences, are composed of logograms, or word symbols, which means something quite different to the generally accepted interpretations of biblical texts. So what about all the keys? What about these other keys? These are things you have to discover for yourself, and I don't mean that to sound like a cop-out. They are things that come as you study. All the 7 keys have never been revealed in so many words. And though there are plenty of hints to be found in The Secret Doctrine, if you read that book, it's a little heady. I don't agree with everything Blavatsky put forth, of course, but reading what she wrote about the keys, you can glean that information. And there were other books that were written by genuine occultists. What we can say is what I've already told you, that every sacred text may be read in one of 3 ways. This is the way to start uncovering the keys. Some of these things I haven't even gleaned all this information from, and I still learn this language. Number 1 is the literal and the intellectual, corresponding to the physical plane and the lower self. So, literal things that you read, the intellectual things you read correspond to our physical plane. and our lower selves, our meat sack selves, if you will. The second is the symbolical and intuitional, corresponds to the astral planes and the higher self. And third, the purely divine and spiritual, which corresponds to the spiritual realms and the soul. So these are some of the ways that every sacred text that you read can be read in one of those three ways: literal and intellectual, symbolical and intuitional, or divine and spiritual. So this then is the sacred mystery language. It unlocks the hidden laws and the principles of man and the universe, and it reveals the mysteries of the past, the present, and the future. It's not a language that can be learned in a week or in a semester, course of some kind. Sometimes you can't even learn this stuff in a lifetime. That's why it's even a little sketchy to me at times. But in the degree that we, as seekers after the truth, thinkers, if you're seeking these things, if you're prepared to learn the elements of it all, and employ the knowledge to study the material and the spiritual, you get nearer to the fountain of the all knowledge and the all wisdom, which is the greatest mystery of all. So this whole idea of the mystery language is something that can't really be defined, although there are 7 keys to understanding it. And so I encourage you, along with me, and we will do some of that here on this program, is try to uncover some of those things. Now, because it is such heady material, I don't want this show to become something that everybody tunes into and I can drone on about something without really starting to glean some understanding of what we're doing. And so as the weeks progress here, I'm going to put out more and more of this information as I am researching it, as I am uncovering it. And I think that there's an importance to understanding the mystery language. I just want to call up some of my notes here. Let me type this in here. Sorry, I didn't do this ahead of time. That's one of the flaws of doing a show where I'm also learning and imparting information as we go on. Let's see, and I'm looking to see if I've even got it here, and I don't know if I do. We'll hit this again a little later, and we'll hit it tomorrow. But I want to talk about the importance of understanding why it's important to understand the mystery language. And it's realizing that there is something more. It's being aware. It's being awake that there's something more than just what we have written down, the language that we speak with. There's something to the universe, to us, to humanity, that is much deeper than simply the things we read, the things we're taught, literalist education, literalist orthodoxy. And so we'll dig into that some more as we get there. And during the break, let's see if I can pull up something here too that I wanted to talk about. I want to get into something about the mystery language and as it applied to the Druids when we come back. But I'm going to talk about a couple of symbols first, and that's the cross and the circle. And there's a couple of those symbols in the mystery language and kind of demonstrate how this was used. So sit tight for a couple of minutes. We're going to go out to break. We'll be right back. All right, gang, welcome back to the show. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network, ODYSY1.com, to go see more about Odyssey Radio. See all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. You can listen to this broadcast or view it in its simulcast video over on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Come on over, join the chat room over there. There's good discussion going on. Add your 2 cents. Ask your questions there, and if you have any, or throw in your information. So I encourage you to go over, and all the archives to this show you can find over there as well. And there are other places you can find the archives, and you just go over to Odyssey Radio, and you can see all the places that this show is broadcast. All right, as promised, at the end of the first part, I want to go into looking at a couple of the symbols that you find within mystery language. And the best way to understand, I'm seeing that I have about this much, and I'm making about the size of a thimble with my fingers, for those of you just listening. I have about this much knowledge about how all of this stuff works. I'm learning this stuff as I go. The one thing that prompted me to do this is realizing that there is more to life, more to the universe, more to what we should know than what we know. And what prompted that was certainly by looking into the mystery languages, the mystery schools, the Gnosticism of the mystery schools of the Gnostics, when compared to early Christianity, and finding out that Christianity in its inception is a very different thing than we have now, because the literalist, historical Orthodox Church won the argument. And so this is what prompted me to look deeper and to dig deeper. And the things I'm sharing with you with this information aren't because I am some kind of exalted master and I know all of these things. I am nothing of the sort. I'm just your humble, lovable guy that's asking questions. And so I thought I'd share this information with you, and I think that this is worth looking into. Now, when we were talking about the mystery language, mentioned that symbols, symbology, play a heavy role in the mystery language, just like the parables did. When you think of the parables of Jesus, and Jesus telling his disciples, the world doesn't get this, but you do, because I'm imparting the mystery to you. He's initiating them. And so I wanted to look at 2 of these symbols, the cross and the circle. Now, I know if you look at, say, Celtic religion, ancient Celtic spirituality, you see a lot of the cross over the circle and all the Celtic knotwork and stuff in there. And so I want to look at these 2 symbols. So both the Eastern and the Western initiates show the cross as coval with the circle of the deific. It's a kind of an infinitude. The circle signifying the first differentiation of the universal essence. The circle, it has no end. Circle, and it contains. The union of the spirit, the vertical bar of the cross, and matter, the horizontal bar, which crosses it. You can also see this in Native American culture, the circle with the cross in the middle. And it's the 4 quarters are called out. And so it's for this reason that the cross is often found inscribed inside the circle. So it's like it's contained within the circle itself. And when it's placed below the circle, in the form of the tau, our capital letter T, as we see in the astrological symbols, for the planet Venus, and it shows manifestation proceeding from the cosmic egg. Now, this is all stuff we haven't talked about in a while, the cosmic egg. If you think of that cosmic egg, think back to when we talked about the Ogdode in Egypt and how the cosmic egg, and it gave birth to, and so on. It's a whole other topic to get into, but this is where the idea comes from. So there's something of the divine and the mysterious has ever been ascribed in the minds of ancient philosophers to the shape of the circle. They recognized that visible circumference which was everywhere, at once and at the invisible center, which was nowhere, was a perfect representation of the deity, uniting the visible and the invisible infinitudes into one. So the finite and the infinite, we mentioned that yesterday. So this merging of the two into a unity, and the name theos applied to both, was explained by Plato in his Cratylus, who derived it from the verb thein, or thein, Thein, phonetically spelled, meaning to move, as suggested by the motion of the heavenly bodies which he connects with the deity. And so sometimes you look at astrological charts, they contain the heavens in this circle. And so the various spirals we see throughout the world at all times, among all nations and peoples, are an extension of this grand symbol, whose esoteric meaning has never been more clearly stated than by Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine. Now, I'm not pushing theosophy on you, because like I said in the last segment, Blavatsky, some of her stuff I can take, some of it I can leave. I don't know where I am on this whole Atlantean thing, although I understand that perhaps Atlantis, as they mention it, and they keep referring to it in her work and in theosophy, was perhaps a, if not a literal place, it was a metaphoric place in the ancients, the way the ancients understood and did things. So let's leave that there for the minute. But in her book, The Secret Doctrine, she said, an archaic manuscript, a collection of palm leaves made impermeable to water, fire, and air by some specific unknown process, is before the writer's eye. She wrote this as she was looking at it. On the first page is an immaculate white disk within a dull black ground. On the following page, the same disk, but with a certain point. And so now this represents the cosmos, our solar system, in eternity, before the reawakening of still slumbering energy, as she put it. And the central point to the circle denotes the dawn of differentiation. It's the point of the world egg of the ancient cosmologies. Cosmologies. I want to say cosmologies whenever I write that word, because that's what I'm used to saying. Cosmogonies. The germ which will become the all. And the boundless periodical cosmos. And the circle thus symbolizes the divine unity from which everything proceeds. Okay? And whether all return, and to which all return. Whither, she says, to whither all returns. So Blavatsky goes on to tell us that the circumference of the circle represents the abstract, ever incognizable presence, and its plane, the universal soul, although the two are one. The face of the disk being white, the background black, further shows all that which is outside the circle is forever beyond our finite human understanding. So believe it or not, folks, there are things we are never going to understand. There are veils which we cannot pierce, and certainly not from this plane. So, this same concept has been beautifully expressed in the New Testament Gospel of John, where he said, and we kind of mentioned this yesterday, he said, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. This was John 1:5. And this is after he talks about, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the same was in the beginning with God. And this has a double meaning. Firstly, that our transient material light, however bright, can never know the true light, which is darkness to our material senses and our finite understanding. You see that the paradox of words used even in biblical text. This tells you something. Just reading the first few verses of chapter 1 of the Gospel of John lets you know how real this mystery language is. All right? Secondly, that the true light does not recognize the phenomenal world, the world of phenomenon, and comprehending it. not, is the way the Gospel of John says. And it's contained or is bounded by the circle of manifestation. It's an illusion, no matter how real it might seem to be to us. And so the same manuscript that Blavatsky refers to contains a number of further illustrations, and each one traces out in precise detail the dawn of manifestation, the process of the formation of the cosmos, and things like that. And first we see the plain circle on a black background, mentioned a little earlier. Next, a circle with a point in it. So the first differentiation in space of the ever-eternal and infinite presence. And we might even call that the point or the dot of life. It's the germ from which all manifestation proceeds. And I don't mean germ in a disease respect, or germy or dirty. It's like germination. That's where we proceed from. And so we observe the same in cells of all kind, which in their first stages of differentiation all contain such a dot or a germ that's proving the Hermetic law, as above to the microcosm, the manifestation of the cosmos, as it does to the microcosm of humans, animals, vegetable life, and everything on earth that's on the physical plane. In the third illustration in this book, the point is transformed into a diameter, which divides the circle into two parts. Horizontally, this is symbolizing a divine, immaculate mother principle within the all-embracing absolute infinitude. And here again, we see correspondence with the process of cell division in the microcosm. When the diameter line is crossed by a vertical line, the circle becomes the mundane cross, with the vertical added. And when the circumference disappears altogether and leaves only the cross behind, the arms of which enclose the four quarters, as I mentioned about Native American, the wheel in Native American culture, have arrived at the phenomenal world, the visible material plane in which we dwell. Okay, y'all got that? Test on Friday. So, we also say that the third illustration, the circle divided in two by the horizontal line, that this symbolizes the first manifestation of creative, though still passive because of the feminine nature. And this is like I talked about cell division. It starts by dividing. And so the first shadowy perception of man connected with procreation is feminine. With the procreation is feminine because man knows his mother more than his father. Hence, female deities were more sacred than the male deities in all the ancient theogonies. Even today, we call nature she, Mother Nature, in recognition of her feminine, nurturing quality, in contradistinction to the male principle, which fructifies it, frankly, by adding to the circle with the horizontal line in it, the phallic almost, the standing upright, if you will, the vertical line, a perpendicular line, and the tau was formed, the oldest form of the letter T in the origin of the Christian cross. And this emblem of the descent of spirit into matter, the so-called fall of man. And when you look at the cross now, you're going to see it a little differently because it originated much earlier than the cross of a crucified Messiah. So, as discussed earlier, we've only hit on this lightly, the occult evolutionary cycles to which our Earth and cosmos are subject are manifestations that proceed in nights and days, or cycles of rest or activity. And so the eternal, perpetual motion which is ever becoming, as well as ever universally present, is perfectly symbolized by the circle. It at once removes all anthropomorphic conceptions of God from the human mind, for it disconnects this deity from any shape or form the mind can conceive of. It's a perpetual, never-ceasing evolution. It circles back on incessant progress through aeons of duration into its original status, which is absolute unity. And it was only the minor gods who were responsible for the ancient work of creation that were never personified by the ancients in human forms, such as the Egyptian god Ra, who represented the solar force we discussed in our article on all of these topics. And so I'm thinking of the jinn when we spoke about them. Remember how the jinn, when he was asked the question about God, is the creator God? No. And the creator is different than the originator. And this is what I'm speaking about here, when this idea of absolute unity, the actual work of creation, is different than the personification of this God, which has no shape or form. But the circle represents him. So the most sacred form of the cross and the circle was the Ankh sign of life. You've seen this. I don't have a picture to put up. You know the Ankh, it's like the T with the oval shape over the top, the circle over the top. And that's the Ankh, and you see it in the Egyptian hieroglyph a lot. Generally, it was the sign of life, and it generally carried in the right hands of the pharaohs and the deceased who had arrived in the other world of Amenta, or in the higher astral realms. And the circle on the top of the Ankh cross further signified the hieroglyphic sign Ru, which means door, gate, mouth, place of outlet. And here it denotes the birthplace in the northern quarter of the heavens, from which the sun is reborn at the winter solstice. Therefore, the Ru of the Ankh cross, is the feminine symbol for the rebirth of the deceased in the real life of spirit. Now, Blavatsky again was shown the secret in the secret doctrine. It showed us, we were shown by Blavatsky in the secret doctrine that the Ru of the Ankh cross was continued in the Cypriot and the Coptic, and Rho, the R of the Slavonian and the Russian alphabets, which was carried over to the Latin P, and the Greek cross, which is the same letter with a crossed vertical stem. But the Ankh cross doesn't belong to Egypt alone. It exists in Hinduism too, under the name of Pasa, a cord which Shiva holds in the hand of his right back arm. Shiva having 4 arms, of course. The god is represented in the posture of an ascetic, as a Mahayogi, with his third eye, which is the aforementioned Ru, set upright on the Tau cross in another form. The Pasa is held in the hand in such a way that it's the first finger and the near hand, the thumb, which make the cross or the loop and the crossing. So the Pasa in Indian culture here has a double significance, just as the Ankh cross did in Egypt. The significance lies in the fact that Shiva is called Rudra, the howler, in the Rig Veda, and in which he appears as a beneficent and the maleficent deity at the same time, the Alpha and the Omega, if you will. In the Vishnu Purana, he's the god who springs from the forehead of Brahma, who separates into male and female, and he's the parent of the Rudras or the Matras, and half of whom are brilliant and gentle, and the other are black and ferocious. And in the Vedas, he's the divine ego aspiring to return to its pure deific state. And at the same time, that divine ego imprisoned in earthly form, whose fierce passions make of him the roarer and the terrible. So this is a depiction, an allegorical form, of the higher and the lower higher. So it's the higher and the lower higher selves of man as discussed in so many different writings, notably in occult studies. And the loop, the circle symbolizing the higher self, the cross of matter, the lower self. And hence the cruciform, the noose, the pasa in the hand of the Indian ascetic or the yoga signifies the straight gate that leads to the kingdom of heaven. So by overcoming the lower self, represented by the cross, which depends from it, thus the Ankh cross, the pasa, carried the same hidden meaning in both Egypt and India, and each is truly a cross in which all the human passions have to be crucified. Before the initiate passes through the straight gate, the narrow circle that widens into an infinite one, as soon as the inner man has passed the threshold. So you start to see some of the similarities coming into the cross of crucifixion. Why that was adapted. This was all mystery teaching. So the significance of the four arms of the cross, pointing to the four cardinal points above and below, left and right, they were well understood by the ancient initiates thousands of years before it was heard of in Europe. And that symbol was and is found all over the world. The riddle of the cross is contained in the 7th and 8th verses of the famous Emerald Tablet of Hermes. As little understood now as it was when the first text came to light between the 6th and 8th centuries. Separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross. Acting prudently and with judgment, ascend with the greatest sagacity from the earth to heaven, and then descend again to the earth, uniting together the powers of things superior of the whole world, and all obscurity will fly away from you. So, as we said earlier, the perpendicular bar of the cross symbolizes spirit, whilst the horizontal bar represents matter, spirit and matter put together. And it's also an emblem for the evolution of the higher and the lower selves, which may rise or fall a perpendicular bar by taking the left-hand path or the right, the horizontal bar, and either separately or together. It's for this reason, as well as many others, that the symbolism of the cross is regarded by occultists as the master key, which opens the door of every science, material as well as spiritual. Do you see that? At least the rudiments of that. You see how the mystery teachings played into the messianic status of the Christ, the crucified, died, and resurrected Christ on a cross, the significance of the cross, the joining of the higher and lower selves. Now, it symbolizes our human existence. The circle of life, the great circle of life, Simba. The circle of life circumscribes the 4 points of the cross, which represent in succession birth, life, death, immortality. And it's regarded philosophically, the 2 lines running in opposite directions, the horizontal and the perpendicular, the 2 which shall never meet except where they cross-sect. The horizontal and the perpendicular is the height and the breadth, which the geometrizing deity divides at the intersecting point. And it's replete with sufficient hidden meaning to fill countless libraries. The meaning behind all of that intersecting of the 2 points that will constantly in infinity run and never meet. So some people believe that the cross is purely a Christian symbol. But as John Temple explained, he was this esoteric writer, the esoteric meaning of Easter, the cross was not adopted by the church until many centuries after the death of Jesus. The fact of the matter is that the cross can be traced back to the very depths of the unfathomable past. Its mystery deepens rather than clears, as we find it on the statues of Easter Island, in ancient Egypt, in Central Asia, engraved on rocks as the Tau and the swastika in pre-Christian Scandinavia and Mesoamerica. In short, we find it everywhere and in all places. The enigma of the cross can be unriddled by the searching for its key in the mysteries of initiation, the key being the cross and the circle. And the initiated adept who had successfully passed through all the trials was attached, not nailed, but simply tied to a couch in the form of a cross or a tau. He was allowed to remain in this state for 3 days and 3 nights, during which time his soul, his higher self, was said to commune with the gods, descend into Hades, Amenta, or Patala, depending on whether the rite took place in Greece, Egypt, or India, and do the works of charity to the invisible beings there, whether the souls of men or elemental spirits, his body remaining all the time in a temple crypt or a subterranean cave. And in Egypt it was placed in the sarcophagus in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, signifying once again the Great Pyramid was not a tomb, it was a ceremonial site. And it carried during the night of the approaching third day to the entrance of the gallery, where at the certain hour the beams of the rising sun struck full on the face of the entranced candidate, who awoke to be initiated by the Hierophant as the representative of Osiris and Thoth, the god of wisdom. So you see, and we're coming to a close now, but you see, and there's more to this that I want to hit, the cross of Christ was adapted by the mystery spirituality, or the other way around. It was adapted from the mystery teachings. The cross meant something. The 3 days meant something. Jesus, when he died, it said he descended into Hades, and he communed and brought cheer to the deceased there. And then he rose and communed with God and rose the second day and then ascended. And so you can see all the symbolism, how it is all put together with this one key to mystery language, the cross and the circle. We'll hit this more again tomorrow. So folks, thanks for being here. Stay tuned. 23 hours, and we'll be right back.